Hello, my name is Rhiannon and I like historical and vintage fashions, and I like making things. Not necessarily that good at them, but I do enjoy it. So this all started when my friend Tammy, who I met at a Regency event 2 years ago now, asked me if I'd like to go with her to Ascot. Now this is a kind of event that I'm really not familiar with, but one thing I do know is that you have to wear a hat. Hats should be worn, but a headpiece which has a base of 4 inches, 10 centimetres or greater in diameter is an acceptable alternative. So, I did lots of research on what other people wore, looked up millions of photos with Kate Middleton, and I then looked at hats that I would like to buy that would go well with the outfit that I've already got selected. And then I realised how expensive they were. And it just was not within my budget. That's not to say that you shouldn't buy these hats. Some of them are absolute works of art, but they were never going to be within something that I could afford. So I decided to make it myself. I haven't made a hat before. I have made a Regency bonnet, but as that fell apart the second I got it out of my suitcase when I got to the Regency event, I don't really think that should count. So if this works, it'll be a miracle. So we're starting with the Simone Bota hat base from Petersham's Millinery Supplies. So here I'm taking a ribbon of gross grain and wrapping it around the hat and measuring it to make sure it fits around the top of the hat. Here I've folded the ribbon in half and I'm pressing it flat with an iron. To keep the ribbon flat, I'm weighting it down with a couple of books so it maintains its shape. Finding the back of the hat, I start pinning the ribbon around the top part of the hat. And then I stitch it down. Now that that's attached, I'm taking velvet piping and laying it around the brim of the hat and stitching that down. I'm also stitching some more onto the other side to make sure that when you see the hat from underneath, you can still see that band of velvet. I then proceeded to stitch the two ends of the velvet together so that it creates a seamless finish. Also from Petersham's Millinery Supplies, I got this piece of veil. I tried lots of different methods of attaching it and didn't like any of them, so I left it until the next day where I had another go, and I think that turned out rather well. So now we just prepare to stitch that down. I've always loved feather hats, so now is the time to attach some feathers. I've got these long ostrich feathers. I really like the way they move. And I've also got these small trimmed feathers which have a nice sort of upright posture. I'm not sure how to use them though. I've also got these little fluffy ones I thought would be nice to hide any mistakes that I might make, and just because I can't resist, I got these lovely peacock feathers. Again, I tried lots of different methods of pinning them to see what would look good, and I eventually settled on mostly just using the ostrich feathers. The feathers are attached by piercing through the racket and wrapping it around to form 2 threads that will then be placed through the hat to attach it. Here I wanted to hide those quills of the feathers, so I decided to cover them over with some of those nice fluffy white feathers. Here I took some offcuts of the ostrich feathers and gently glued them down onto the fluffy white feathers to allow for more of a gradient between the colour changes on the hat. And then I proceeded to sew them down. During this process I found that you could in fact bend the hat to give it a slightly more interesting shape. By just holding it in place for a few seconds, it does maintain a slightly more curved and interesting pattern. So after a very long few days of sewing, I finally felt happy with the shape, and Grebo's been desperate to get in here, so it's probably now time for a reveal. As you can see here, I'm still deeply uncomfortable with the vanity shots. So, this is the finished hat. To get that off, I'm using these hat pins to keep it on because apparently I like to make things difficult for myself. So this is it. Honestly, I'm really pleased with it. For something that I've never done before, I think this was pretty awesome. There are a couple of things, like I could not get this hat band to lay flat no matter what I did with it. So in future I think I'd leave something that used a little bit more stretch to it, just to make that work a bit better. I really like the back. It took a lot more work than I honestly thought it did, but I'm really happy with it. I did wonder quite a few times if the whole thing was just a bit much. I looked up lots of other people's hats and I don't think this is too much. I think I'm actually going to be quite understated, to be perfectly honest, considering how much wiggle there is. I love the movement when this gets going. So there's a couple of other things that I need to finish off before we go in a couple of months. I have got this belt, but I'm currently trying to lose a little bit of the owl squidge just for my health. So as I am doing that, I'm going to stitch this on a bit later, a bit closer to the time, so it sits flush. I've also got these incredibly cheap gloves, which I think I might jazz up a little bit around the edge, maybe just do some crochet. They came with these little diamante bows and all sorts of really fluffy frilliness, and that's not really me. I think I'd like something a little bit more understated, so I have to work on that. There's also a couple of other things, this is my first video. I clearly need to get more comfortable with the camera because I look like a startled rabbit the entire time. I also need a couple of things if I'm going to carry on doing this. I need some better lighting. Because this is just the overhead lights in my living room, which don't even have proper lampshades. They've got Christmas ones on because the original lampshades were ugly as sin. So I also probably need better recording equipment. I cannot see what's going on that camera. I could not be filming for all I know, because there is no front viewfinder. It is just a digicam that I've had for years. But yeah, other than that, I've actually really enjoyed this, and I think it went as well as you could possibly expect it to. So from me and my marvellous creation, yeah, I'll hopefully see you again in the future. Ta-ra! So this is Grebo, and he is my son, and I love him.